Okay, now the next step is we're going to turn this glass over, and you can see I'm putting fingerprints all over this thing, and I'm doing that on purpose. We're going to turn this over, and we're going to eventually be pouring our CopyFlex liquid on top. What we have to do is we have to anchor this glass, and we want to use something that works like an adhesive. Now, I came out with this product called Anchor-Dit, and it's basically made from non-toxic food-grade waxes. It is not a glue. It is not an adhesive or a caulk. What it is a very sticky, thick substance, okay? And I put it on about 1/16 of an inch. You could just put it on kind of like buttercream or icing. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take the wine glass and we're going to turn it over. And then we're going to push down on this glass, and we're going to push straight down. And what we want to happen is we want the Anchor-Dit to be pressed or forced out the sides. Now, this does two things. This anchors your glass to your work surface so it doesn't move or float when we pour the silicone on top, but it also seals the bottom so that we don't get any CopyFlex finding its way underneath our project, which will make a very poor opening to our mold. And you're going to see that later on in the video, how all that works. For now, we press it until we get what I call a smush all the way around, and then we do our best to wipe the excess Anchor-Dit away. Now, I always like to use a tissue because a tissue is very absorptive, much different than a paper towel, even more absorptive than a cloth towel, and it does a good job. If you want, you can use your spatula and wrap a tissue around it in order to get to the bottom, in order to get all of the really minute amounts of Anchor-Dit off. So, we've mounted our glass. We've wiped the excess Anchor-Dit away. What do we have to do? I hope you guessed that we have to wash the glass, and I really hope that that's something you don't forget, because once again, we've put fingerprints all over this glass. We also have some Anchor-Dit that must have been rubbed up against the bottom of the glass. And so what I'm going to do again is take my water and dishwashing liquid. Any grease cutting cleaner does a pretty good job. And I'm making sure that I'm going around the bottom of the glass. And any of the glass portions of this wine goblet that aren't covered with silicone, where I may have touched it and put on a fingerprint. So what I do is I wipe it really, really well, and then I'm going to dry it. Now when you do this, you'll see a real difference in the glass. It shines up really, really nice. And at this point, when you're done washing it, you don't want to touch the wine glass again. And if you do, you should wipe it and get rid of your fingerprints. So now our glass has been prepped and mounted, and it's ready for the final step in the actual mold making process, where we're going to take what we now call a tube-it. This is basically, a paper tube like we've used in other tutorials. We have different diameters and different heights. And what we want to do is we want to place this tube-it over the wine glass. We want to secure it around the bottom, and then we're going to add our liquid CopyFlex silicone. Now, one of the first things that we've got to do when we use a tube-it, and I'm not going to show you how because it's very basic, we're going to take another material like the Anchor-Dit, it's called Seal-Dit, and we're going to apply it on the inside of the tube-it. Now what we've done is we have marked the inside of the tube-it with where we're going to actually pour the silicone. We measured a 1/2 inch higher than the height of this glass. And then what we did was we measured inside of the tube-it, and we put a mark there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to center this tube-it around the glass and close one eye and make sure that the spacing around the glass is very even and uniform. Now, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to bring in a hot glue gun. This is something new. And I realized in the past I've taught how to seal the bottom with safety clay. And what I can do with safety clay and what you in your shop or in your home can do with safety clay are two different things. And so what I've realized is that I've got to make allowances for people who don't have experience, or maybe this is your first time working with clay. And I'm going to get into how to put the clay on in a really excellent way. But the hot glue we're going to use for insurance. And what I'm going to do is I'm just basically going to apply hot glue all the way around the bottom of the tube. Now, you have to be very, very careful not to move the tube while you're applying the hot glue. But what this is going to do is it's going to give us a little more insurance that this tube is not going to rise up and allow the CopyFlex silicone to burst out of the bottom and run all over your counter and make kind of a mess. So we've just hot glued all the way around the bottom, and what we're going to do is we're going to wait for that to cool and become solid. So we've allowed the hot glue to set up, and as you can see it makes a nice seal on the bottom. Now what we're going to do is we're going to apply our safety clay. Now basically I just rolled it out into a string, and the safety clay is just an excellent clay seal that we can put along the outside bottom of the tube-it in order to once again ensure that the silicone is not going to leak out the bottom when we pour it in. Now, safety clay is a non-toxic, non-drying clay that you can use over and over again in your mold making projects. This is what I want to show you. Basically, I think what has been happening in the past is some of my students have put it on like this and they say, okay, this is good. But what I really want you to do is to push it and then to smear it up against the tube-it and also against your work surface. You see that? I'm pushing it in and then I'm smearing it against the tube-it and the work surface. Now what this does is it increases the surface area where the clay is in contact with the tube-it and also with the flexible chopping mat, and you get a really excellent seal. Now, you might think that this is enough clay, but what I want to do now is come back with a thicker strand and basically do the exact same process all over again. We're going to push it down around our 2-bit. And then we're going to seal it against the 2-bit and against our work surface. Now we have the bottom of this 2-bit secured very, very well. At this time, what I want to do is I want to show you another insurance, just so we don't have any leakage. After we pour the CopyFlex liquid and it's filled, you can actually put like a heavy book or a weight on top of the 2-bit, and that will keep a force pressing down against the seal at the bottom, further ensuring that we don't have any leaks. Some people think, oh, if I put something across the top, it's not going to dry. And I want to remind you that there's no drying here whatsoever. CopyFlex cures, and it doesn't require oxygen to do that. So it doesn't have to be open to dry. The entire column of silicone is going to cure whether you cover it or not. So we'll just put that away. And now we're going to get ready to actually pour into our 2-bit mold box. And I'll show you how to do that in our next segment. Now that we have the 2-bit mold box set and we have the glass inside mounted, now what we're going to do is we're going to mix the liquid CopyFlex silicone. Now, the CopyFlex will come in a kit, and it is a 1-to-1 mix ratio. So you're going to get equal parts of part A and part B. And they are mixed together, and then they will, over a 5-hour period, they will cure into a food-grade silicone rubber. Again, a lot of this has been covered in great detail in my video, How to Make a Sugar Bottle Mold. And so we're just going to go over this again, more of a summary. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the first part, we're just going to put it into our mixing bucket. And then we're going to take the same amount of part B and we're going to pour it right on top. And we're just going to mix that in. Now, on our website, we have all these kits all ready to go. We even have the glass. So you get the glass and the 2-bit and the safety clay and the Anchor-Dit and of course the CopyFlex. And it's all set up so that you can make a perfect mold of all different types of glassware. Now, as you can see, I've got the 2 different mixtures or parts, and I'm going to just start mixing. And when I mix the CopyFlex, I'm really trying to scrape the sides and the bottom as I mix. Once again, we have two parts, different colors, and the colors are there so that you know when you have a good mix completed, because it'll be a uniform orange color. So we're just going to mix that. Now, one of the secrets to mixing silicone is you don't mix in one bucket. You do most of the mixing in one bucket, and then we're going to transfer it to a second mixing container. And we do this because you remember that the orange was the first material that we had in this container, and then we poured the white on top. It's just physics that keeps us from being able to scrape off every molecule off of the bottom of this container right here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to switch it into another container. And what was on the bottom of our first container right here, is now on the top of the second mixing container. And so basically what we do here is we ensure that we can have another go at it. And we're going to mix all these materials together very, very well. OK. So now we have a uniform orange color. And I feel like I've mixed the two parts together very well. So I'm going to set that aside. Many people have asked me, how do I clean up my silicone mess? And basically, all you have to do is take a dry, clean paper towel or tissue and wipe up the majority of the spill. And then I provide on my website, this is a special material worked into a cleaning cloth. We call them our silicone cleanup cloths. And what you can do is you can wipe off your counters and your brushes and your equipment. And it really helps to dissolve the silicone. And then you would just dry it off. And you're ready to go. Now remember this. We have our wine glass inside of our tube-it. And I'm going to bring this over to one side. Want to make sure that we have a nice line of sight down here inside the tube-it. And we want to see the pour line where we're going to stop with our pour. Now, in the past, what I've done is I've wanted my students to pour in between the object and the inside of the tube-it. But because the glass, the shape of the wine glass and most glasses, kind of bows out, and because it comes pretty close to the sides, if we pour on one side of the glass, the silicone is going to bulge. And it's going to kind of accumulate on one side, and it's going to possibly push our project off-center. So instead of pouring on one side, what we're going to do is we're going to pour right on top. So we like to take the CopyFlex over the edge, and I'm pouring it right in the middle of the glass. And I like to let it drop, because what happens here is that the air that we incorporated when we mixed the CopyFlex gets stretched. That's why I call this a stretch pour. It gets stretched as it falls down into the container. And that stretching action helps to pop a lot of those bubbles so it doesn't get incorporated into our mold. Now, you probably noticed that I just didn't pour everything into the mold all at one time. And I do that on purpose. What I want to do is I want to give the glass and the mold a chance to receive some of the CopyFlex. I want the CopyFlex to fall down and around the wine glass on all sides, and I want it to find the bottom and then seat down there and find its way equally across and around the entire wine glass. So now we have even pressure. And so when I look, I can see that my CopyFlex, I can see it all the way around my wine glass, and it's found the bottom of the tube-it. And so now what we can do is we continue with our stretch pour. And as you can see, we can pour it from quite a distance, about 12 inches. And as the bubbles roll over the edge and go down this column, what they do is they stretch and they pop. And that's a very good thing. Now, I like to pour it right in the middle of the glass so that the CopyFlex is settling around the glass evenly and we have no pressure on one side or the other, which can overcome the adhesive and the stickiness of our Anchor-Dit. Okay, so we got to go in there now and scrape. Okay, so I don't like to waste material, and I've gotten every little bit of CopyFlex, and it has hit our pour line. So I know now that I've got the right levels. Again, just take tissues or paper towels and wipe up your spills and your tools, and then just come back with your silicone cleanup cloth, and you're all set. All right, so we've got our tube-it filled, and as you can see, we've got some air rising, and just imagine how much air would have been trapped underneath the bottom of the glass, which is up here. It's actually on the top. Just think about how much of that air would have been trapped as we watch it actually come to the top of the surface. What I like to do is I'll take a little tool and I'll just do a couple circles here, because in the beginning, when you've trapped a lot of air, that air is going to come up immediately. And I like the top of my mold to be smooth, so giving it a little stir like that just pops the air. So, if you want, remember, we can take our big book. I'm sure you have probably a weight in the basement, and just put it on top. That's further insurance that we don't get a leak. I would check on it periodically just to make sure that we don't have a problem. The silicone really wants to, what we've done is we've trapped this into a column, and we're keeping it against gravity, and it really wants to come out. So the pressure down here can be severe. So as time passes, this is getting closer and closer to a solid rubber, therefore it doesn't flow. But I wouldn't just walk away. I'd look on this in the first hour and make sure that everything is good. If you follow the steps that I showed you, it should hold every time, and you shouldn't have any spills. So now what we're going to do is we're going to let this cure for 5 hours, and then I'm going to show you how to unmold and cut this mold so we can use it to make our sugar glassware.